Hello, hello. I am sweating like a Hebrew slave, it looks like on the screen here. I can feel the sweat dripping down my head here. Because Philip is making me so nervous, we have Philip back again. Um, and we are just continuing the fellowship online through these interview questions, I suppose. We both have a background, um, um, a little similar background. We are both paper boys. I don't even know there's such thing. Do kids go on paper house anymore?
I don't know. I don't think they know what that is. I've told my kids about it, but I can't explain to them what it is. But it's pretty foreign now.
Yeah, no. In the digital age, it's probably not as significant these days in the digital era. Back in the days, that used to be the life source for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, to say back in the days, almost, I don't know if it's making me feel older, or maybe that's just the pace of technology. I mean, that's probably about 30 years ago.
Yeah, technology is flying.
Yeah. Anywho, so to get started, let you get a little bit warm up. Philip, just reintroduce yourself. Reintroduce, what you're doing or what you're passionate about. And maybe since the last time I've talked with you, is there anything significant that's been on your mind lately?
Yeah, sure. I'm Phillip Mason, and I started a nonprofit called IncredibleFathers.org, and I have a Substack account that I've been sharing different thoughts and ideas with people, but I'm mostly focused in on helping those with PTSD, and also as fathers, helping us take charge of our education for our children and shaping that for them. A lot of homeschoolers and a lot of people going to charter schools. I love to connect with them. I'm a homeschooling family myself, and so I think we live in a society where we really need to focus on our education, improving ourselves, and I think that's one of the reasons why our society has been struggling so much over the last 10 years or longer. Is because we've kind of put education to the side. So I've been doing a lot of those things, and I love connecting with people and being able to help them overcome some of those challenges that they're facing in their lives. So that's a little bit about me.
What's currently on your mind overall? Like, is there anything that's of recent that's been on the top of your head?
Yeah, so I'm also a school teacher, and so one of the schools that I'm associated with has a connection to Hillsdale College, which is a very it's known as being a conservative school, and they've gotten a lot of people look at them as gotten involved in politics quite a bit, and people are sometimes critical of that. Some people are like, yes, that's awesome. But I think one of the challenges that we're facing in our society today is that there's an unwillingness to cooperate. There's an unwillingness to collaborate, and an unwillingness to kind of negotiate through things. We don't always see things in the same light, particularly from a political standpoint, but in all areas of life. But I think a good education, if you have a good education, that really helps. If you've read the right books and you've had a good Western civilization education, I often refer to it as a classical education. That's the way Americans used to be educated back in the 16, 17, and 1800s. We've gotten away from it starting in the mid to late 1800s. We started getting away from it, and we had kind of our traditional public school system that we have now today.
Yeah.
But that education, allows people to open a dialogue up and have intelligent conversations. But we struggle to have intelligent conversations in our society today. And a lot of it's because our education is poor. And it doesn't mean we don't have education. It usually means a lot of us are highly trained. So we have we have a lot of degrees to our name, but it's usually work related, or it's a certain skill that we've developed. But to be broadly educated, both deeply and broadly educated in the liberal arts, in all areas of the humanities and studies, and being able to have this understanding between what is right and wrong, and have kind of sometimes people refer to it as a character development type education. So reading a lot of the good classic books and movies and music and art, all of that can really enrich the soul, and it can make the public dialogue a lot better. And I think, tying this around full circle, is if we have more people that are better educated, have that, a true liberal arts education, they read the right books, we can have a civil dialogue again in politics. We can have a civil dialogue again in the public arena and civic society. And I think that's really important. So those are some of the things that have been floating around in my head.
Yeah. When you're talking about those things, I always talk about, man, as I was thinking back in my head, I'm like, man, I see the most well-educated people still down there, very strong path, kind of ish. But I think, like, I agree with you. If the more educated you are, you would hope that there would be opportunity to have more, I guess, what they would call civil discourse, live, educated debate without being too emotionally triggered. The hard part about that is I see, on my end, is particularly as a therapist and somebody who observes the sociology of the environment. People, yeah, I see this process across the board, emotionally and mentally, where when people get latched onto emotion, it completely changes how they think about things. And it even warps their ideology. I even argue, I'm probably end up writing in a book one day, it even warps their philosophy on life. It goes from emotion, the things that we're most emotionally, that matter the most to us emotionally, to the thought process associated with this emotion to help validate that emotion. And then it becomes this like warped ideology in the right direction or the wrong direction, you know? And you see this person who may have initially came into a conservative or liberal space with a relatively healthy disposition. And by the time they've evolved into that space, they're like these raging, polarizing individuals. You noticed that? Like
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've seen it all over the place, and it's
Yeah.
a big problem. And I'm trying to make sure that doesn't become me. Well, we allow emotions to dictate our feelings and decisions on things. And I see this in my students a lot of times. They're as they're being raised up, they get sucked into TikTok and to whatever's going on Instagram. And then there's, most of it's what we call an emotional appeal. And people are saying, this is wrong, this is evil. And there's all this, social justice on certain issues. But if you take a reasoning approach and you go, so let's go do a little research on this and see what the facts are behind this. A lot of times you can say, well, yeah, I don't know if that's actually the right approach, because, this is what the data shows, or this is what has been the history on this in the past. So, things aren't always what they seem to be. And we're pretty good at sometimes twisting things. I'm a big fan of Thomas Sowell. He's probably our most famous living economist. But he's a contrarian. So he's also a very conservative, politically speaking. But he does a really good job of this, of just being unemotional about things and just saying, well, okay, let's look at the history here. Let's look at the data. Let's look at what some of the other experts in this field have said. And he brings it all together and say, well, these are the facts. So if you're making this conclusion, how do you get there? And he's showing people that it's this emotional connection they have to it. And so go to the root cause. In the business field, they have this Six Sigma training. Basically, they teach people to ask questions. So a business leader will ask questions. And usually by the fifth or sixth question, when you drill down, that's actually when you're getting to the root cause of what's actually happening, what's actually going on. And so I think as individuals, that's what we need to do is drill down, find the facts, and, use our reasoning. Our emotions can help guide us, and our senses and feelings can help guide us, but they need to be balanced with our minds and our reasoning. There needs to be a balance there. And you've probably seen that in your study, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
You met with people.
It's one of the, it's probably one of the foundational elements of approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is widely recognized as a secure approach in helping people go from emotionalism to a heightened level of wisdom or awareness about their circumstance. I want to shift questions here a little bit. I'm not, tell me, I'm curious. One of the things that I'm curious about on my podcast journey is understanding people's family background and pattern of life and how it impacts them. particularly as it relates to like passing down legacy kind of ish, and even financial wealth kind of ish. I'm riddled with curiosity, particularly a Midwestern type of curiosity on how our family systems pass down generational wealth in the form of knowledge and even financial, gains. Um, does any of that resonate with you with regards to your background, how you were raised? Do you feel like you gained something from your parents? You know, um, in terms of inheriting. I'll put it under the context of um, inheritance. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually something I write about quite a bit on Substack, and I think it's critical. We in the United States, there's actually there's a huge amount of fatherlessness, and kids growing up without fathers in the home. The fathers play a really critical role, and sometimes pop culture kind of downplays the importance of the father in the home, but the father's critical in a child forming their sense of justice and mercy, their sense of love, their sense of responsibility, their sense of having responsibility to go out and work and to provide for themselves. And a lot of times that sense of discipline comes from the father, and a child needs that structure and that love from a father. And it's a different type of love, and children learn different things from their fathers than they do from their mothers. And so, I believe God made a complete package there with the man and the woman, leading and guiding their children. You need both, ideally, and it's not always going to be that way, but that's the ideal that we're shooting for. So I've seen this personally in my life, where my father and my mother were awesome people, tremendous people, and so they spent a lot of time teaching me. Before I went to school, I went to public school. Before I went to school, my mom, she spent like a half an hour to 45 minutes with us teaching stuff, helping us memorize things before we went off to hit the school bus. Wow. And then we got back home from school. Yeah, usually we had a snack, or maybe we had a little activity, but usually it was jump right back in and do the homework. So it got pretty intense there. But my parents were really deliberate about teaching us and making sure we're getting what we need to. And, if I was struggling with something and my mom was struggling to connect with me, oftentimes my dad, once he got home from work and we had dinner and things kind of settled down for the evening, he would jump in and start tutoring me and helping me on homework that I was struggling with, or perhaps mom felt like it was not something she wanted to spend time on with me, and it would be better for dad to take on that subject, something that he was an expert in. So I really appreciate that about my parents. But I think it goes a lot deeper than that as well. So my grandparents and great grandparents, and my parents always kind of taught us family history, like where you come from. So we can trace our family ancestors all the way back to the Mayflower, which wow. 80 million Americans can do that too. And so that family history is really important to us. And I think if people don't have a sense of where they came from and who their ancestors are, they're not fully understanding themselves. So a lot of those ideals can trickle down, and some of that certainly can be political nature, or your political views, or your views on freedom, or your views on liberty, your views on systems of government. And it can go into personal things too, like spirituality or religion, how you view God, or how you view yourself to God, or, some parents pass down that there is no God, and teach that to their children. So I think all of that's very important in my life. And I've seen that pattern over and over again.
Have your parents, when you talk about generational, values being passed down from one generation to the next, is there wealth in your family? Like, is there a wealth system? Literally financial wealth system that's passed down from one generation to the next, even in your family system? And, why or why not?
Yeah, I think in a lot of different aspects there are certainly wealth in the form of knowledge. The church that I go to, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I'm like a 7th or 8th generation member, depending on what line you're looking at, of that church. So there's a lot of history there. So there's wealth in the sense of we have this faith structure, and that really defines who we are. In terms of like finances, my parents taught me to save. They taught me to stay out of debt. They taught me, there's very rare occasions where you might go into debt, such as owning a home or getting more education. But other than that, you stay out of debt. They taught me to, spend sparingly, to be frugal. So those were some of the things that kind of trickled down, and they got that from my grandparents who lived through the Great Depression and who, were deeply impacted by that and were very frugal. I can even remember one time with my grandparents, my grandmother was wearing these same old dresses, and my aunt and my mom were like, "Okay, Mom, you probably should get some new dresses now. It's about time, And she's like, "Oh, we just don't have the extra money for dresses like that." And my aunt was like, "Oh, come on, Mom. I'm sure you've got some extra money." And they've got money. They've been working for 50 years or whatever at this point.
Right.
And so she turns to my granddad and she's like, "Dad, does Mom have money to buy a dress?" And he just kind of chuckles and like, "Yes, if she wants to buy a dress, she can go buy a dress." But the idea there behind that story is, they have this mindset, this frugality. Like, if you don't absolutely need something, don't buy it, because, save your money up, because there might be a time where, you have a great recession or another depression. You want to be prepared and ready for it, so it doesn't throw you under the bus.
Yeah. Is there a wealth transfer in your family system though? Like, does wealth get transferred down? I mean, that's my direct question to you, without divulging into too much detail, of course.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because that's something I have been seeing is, my grandparents have all been passing away, and they have been able to pass on some wealth to the next generation. And so my parents have actually seen that happen on both sides of their family, where they've actually inherited like actual financial wealth from their parents. And, in our country, it's actually really difficult because there is, sometimes they call it a death tax or the estate tax. It can be difficult for multi-generational wealth to occur. So I imagine at some point when my parents pass away, that some of that money will still be available, and pass that on to my siblings and myself. And hopefully I can continue that on and pass that on to my children so that they'll be in a better spot. And
do your parents ever talk about that? I mean, so it hasn't passed on to you just yet. I mean, have you experienced any type of generational passing down of wealth or support from your parents?
I have a little bit, particularly in the education field, because my grandparents were really into education, and they wanted some of that generational wealth passed down to go towards education. So, for example, there's a particular fund that we set up for myself and all my cousins and my siblings. My grandparents actually set this up, and so to actually help pay for tuition. So there's an actual trust fund. And we've used some of that monies to pay for tuition. So I've benefited from that, and my siblings have, and my cousins all have. So that's been a huge blessing.
Okay. All right. So there's experience, but there's also, I hear there's also a deep financial education that's been passed on from one generation to the next, as far as how you maintain your own wealth, with regards to what you earn, which very much I respect, and admire, even with regards to that. I think, the cultural background I come from, we don't come from that type of educational set, even though now the information is pretty readily available, free across the board. There's a lot of outside sources, but I would probably argue that financial knowledge is probably far more important than financial wealth in and of itself, because you can get financial wealth and burn through it if you don't know how to preserve it for your family system, pass it down. So, as far as we are here to talk about paper. I feel like we go down too many alleys here. We're gonna end up carrying this into an hour conversation. I don't want to burn up too much of your time, but we're here to talk about war stories. I think I initiated the conversation talking about my war story as a paper boy. You said you have your own war stories with regards to your own paper. We need to have a continued paper route. I wonder if anybody else has had it. I should find other people who have I call them paper route stories. Paper route war stories. Glories, make that like a segment of the podcast there.
Newspaper glory days.
Yeah, man. Right. When paper was important. Right. What are your paperboy war stories? What you get? Give some stories, some living stories, some exciting stories while you're here.
Yeah. Oh, some of them are good, and some of them are not so good. But so this is just a quick one here off the bat. So, when I was first getting started, I was pretty young. So I think I subbed my first route when I was 11 years old. And I can remember I was subbing for a much older boy who was actually in high school, a lot bigger than I am. And I remember doing his route. And I remember the first time as an 11-year-old, putting on the newspapers. And it was a big route. I think it was actually 2 routes together. And the weight of it was like literally just like crushing me. I remember that being so hard walking around with this big, heavy newspaper bag. But like, I was just so determined. I was like, I wanted the money. I wanted to have my own job. So like, I just kept walking. Like I could almost feel like my spine like crippling in, but I just kept with it and kept going. But I subbed for another guy who had a route, and their family was going on vacation. So I think it was like for a week or something like that. And he never paid me. I never got payment from him. He always tell me, I'll pay you, I'll get your money. And I'd follow up with him, and he never paid me. So I learned how to be a collector. I had to learn how to collect my money. So I never subbed for him again because he never paid me. So, and then, as I think one of the skills that was really great was going out every month. I'd have to go collect from all. I think originally my route had like 74 houses. That was when it was the biggest size. I think the smallest size was around 34, but I'd have to go knock every door and ask for money. I think it was like around $10 a month is what the subscription was for. And that was sometimes intimidating. And it was a lot of work too, to go around each door, knock 60 to 70 doors and ask for my check.
Oh my goodness.
Sometimes it was a day of reckoning, because it's like, you thrown my newspaper up on my roof a few times, and I had to get a ladder out, get it down. So like, I don't know if I want to pay you. So it's a kind of a day of reckoning, and have to like, face one of my neighbors and, explain to them why my service hasn't been the best.
How old were you? How old were you when you were doing those things?
It was probably like 12, 13, 14.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. I had a route for a long time. Like, I don't think I gave mine up until like 16 or 17 or something like that. And I finally got other employment, but I always had it.
Yeah, the paper route thing was an interesting journey, because it's like you're getting a job before you can actually work.
Yeah,
actual job. Nothing like getting a little money as a little kid, get a little money at that age, Yeah.
So I can tell you one positive story, one negative story here real quick. So I had, there was a time where my brother had a route. There was a time where we transitioned, we shared it, and then he had it. I was no longer doing it, so I was older at this point. And it was Christmas Day, so you have to deliver those papers every single day. Like, you're not off the hook, right? And so Christmas morning, you got to get up and deliver those papers. And Christmas morning, it's got all the ads in it, so crazy heavy.
Right.
So I heard my brother asking my dad, "Hey, can you get up with me? Can you drive me around so I can do a route on Christmas morning?" And my dad was like, "Well, of course I can do that. I'd be glad to help you." Nice. And I remember thinking, I'm like, this would be so cool if I like woke up super early and snuck out there without anyone knowing it. And I delivered all the papers so that when my brother goes out the next morning, he can't find any newspapers, because they drop them off on our front driveway. A truck would come and drop them off. And so that's what I did. And so I snuck up. I got up at I think it was like 4 a.m. I got up at 4 a.m, and I was really quiet getting through the house. I brought the newspapers back into the garage and folded them really quietly and made sure I didn't squeak any doors or anything like that. Went out and delivered the whole route, went back in, climbed in my bed, and went back to sleep. And I was woken up probably about an hour later, maybe like an hour and a half later. And I hear all these footsteps running up down the stairs, and my brother's all panicked. He's like, "Oh no, I woke up late. I got to get the newspapers out," because he did. Well, we had like a 6:30 deadline, so it had to be
Oh,
done by 6:30 a.m. All the newspapers had to be out, and I think it
yeah.
was like 6:20 or something. He was panicking, like, "Oh, I got to get these out," and so he's running up double stairs to my parents' room. Dad, you got to help me. And so my dad's like, "All right, I'm getting up," and I could hear all this because he's like yelling, and the house is quiet. And so he runs outside, and I hear him come back in from the garage, and he's like, "There's no papers out there. They must have forgot to deliver the papers." And he's telling my dad, "They forgot to deliver the papers."
Yeah.
And so they're trying to figure this out. I'm like, well, "Why don't you call the newspaper and find out where the newspapers are at?" And then all of a sudden my mom's like, "I wonder if Phillip did it. Why don't you go ask Phillip if he did it?" And so,
Interesting. All right.
yeah, my brother came down, and I was just like, "Merry Christmas."
Wow.
And he was
Yeah,
so happy. Like, it just totally made his day. He was just so glad he didn't have to worry about that. And he got to sleep in and everything. So it was cool.
nice. Yeah, like what? Like, but the fact that you had the tenacity to do that for your brother, that it definitely like says a lot of things as far, even far as the closest of the family. But the fact that you had the brass to wake up at 4 o'clock and do the paper out, geez,
Yeah.
it's almost
Yeah.
like you're a hard working. Like, you know, if you're doing paper out, you learn how to be hard work. Anybody that's done a paper out, there's a certain level of hard work, because you got to wake up early in the morning.
Yeah.
You got to really have some brass in order to wake up early enough to be able to do those things. And then you're getting the papers raw. I forget about that process. You're getting the papers are coming to you unfold, unpackaged.
You got to fold them all, pack
you got to fold them all, put in the inserts if it's like a Sunday or whatever, and then wrap it and put each one of them in a thing. I forgot about that whole complicated process.
Yeah, and you've got to figure out some people are on vacation, so you got to hold their papers for them. Or some people, you've got to know exactly who in your route's getting it, and sometimes they don't get it every day. You got to be on top of all of that. So,
yeah, I just had that complication. I had a complication where I had to do that. I just remember just taking the papers and going in and delivering them. I don't know if they got any more complex than that. But one of the things you learn, if you're doing stuff like that, you learn responsibility at an early age. You're going to be responsible for your time. So that's interesting. I should interview people and find out what their this interest. If you want to do a 3-way conversation, this could be like a hook between me and you. Is these paper route conversations? I definitely be interested.
I think most people have stories like this, whether it's newspaper or some other business, where they learn how to be consistent and they learn how to work hard and they learn how to, elevate their game a little bit and be responsible in life.
Yeah, let me ask you a question related to that, and then I'll shift. We're probably way over here. But what lessons do you feel like you learned even through that experience? Really?
Yeah. So I was just thinking about it like the other day. It never occurred to me I could take a vacation. Like, I was just like, when I accepted the route, they're like, you have to deliver these 365 days a year, and you have to have them done by 6:30 a.m. each morning. And it has to be delivered to each person. Okay. That's your responsibility. And so I just did that every single day. And I think my mom probably mentioned this to me, but she's like, well, you could get someone to sub your route if you're getting tired or worn out. And so I've kind of always had this mentality of, I don't take a holiday, I just go, I work. But I've learned the importance of, like, the rest is important. Like, you have to recharge your batteries, and sometimes it's more work to go get a sub and tell them how to do the route and everything. So sometimes you're hesitant to do that, but I think it's important for people to take breaks. It's important for you to get rest and take vacations. So that's something I haven't been very good at in my life, and taking rest, but I've been getting better at it. So that's a good lesson I've learned from it. I think the other thing is just the consistency, being committed to something, and just doing it day in and day out. And that's what produces results. And so I had more money in my bank account than probably most of my kids in my class at school, just because I was consistent in doing my newspaper route. And I very rarely spent money. So I had a pretty good chunk of money saved up by the time I went off to school. And then I also did a mission trip for my church, served a full-time mission. And so that helped as well. So I think all that preparation and planning, I think all of that, it helps you realize you can achieve your goals when you save up, and little efforts day by day add up to be big things later on. So
yeah. I want to pause on that. I don't want to. I know we're probably, I don't want to press time too much on your end here. I appreciate you for sharing your story, your uplifting story. Yeah, and I'll definitely appreciate just hearing a little bit of the ideology that has been passed down from one generation to the next. I hope that maybe the listener even is able to latch on to a lot of this information. I think there's a lot of valuable information that's even been expressed, even in talking about how understanding a little bit of your generational background and how legacy has been passed down from one generation to the next. People like to think that generational wealth is about money, but generational wealth, I would imagine you would agree with this, is more about education and being educated financially.
yes.
And if I was to use your words there, probably overall being well-rounded educationally would probably be something that you might say. To put words in your mouth.
No, you're right. That's what I would say.
To end the podcast, I always like to leave with a personal thought or affirmation. What's a personal, aside from what we already talked about so far, what's a personal thought, verse, or belief that has helped guide you along your journey?
Yeah, and so I'm a religious person, and so I believe that I'm a child of God, or a son of God, and that for a lot of people that may sound a little shocking, but I believe everyone on this planet is. So like that's something I'll affirm to myself in the morning, is that I am a child of God, and so because I am, I have to act differently. I have to, I can't do some of the things that I may see other people doing, and it requires me to have a little bit of integrity. So that's an affirmation that's really important to me. But I think also just having a belief in myself and just saying, you can do today. You've done it before in the past. You can do it again today, and complete another day. Those are affirmations that I like to tell myself as I get started with the day. That belief is very powerful. When you exercise belief, it develops your faith. And faith is a course of action. So if you believe you can do something, then you can take that next action you need to succeed.
Nice. Well, thank you for entering into the podcast again with me. If you're game, I could always add energy to this. We'll talk about that afterwards there, but appreciate your time.
Yeah,
I'm going to shut down the podcast at this point, and maybe we could talk a little bit afterwards, and then we'll
okay.
keep going in.
Sounds good. Yeah.